Let's answer chapter 28, number 3, hopefully without a telemarketer ringing my phone and computer while I'm recording, which happens several times a day while I'm trying to make these videos, and just happened in the last effort I made to answer this question. You can tell how very thrilled I am to have that happen. So, here we go. Explain what happens to the elasticity of demand for labor in a given industry after each of the following events. So, the author has a list of new determinants for the price elasticity of the demand for labor. I don't think that makes much sense. I think it makes more sense to understand the determinants of the price elasticity of a good or service, which we explored earlier in the semester, and to learn to apply that to other markets such as labor. We have the tools already to answer this question. Let's just sharpen those tools so that way when you get hit with a news event about something going on in the world, they're still there for you. To me, that makes a lot more sense than trying to learn his precise lists related to precise markets. And I'm not alone. I'm fairly sure that what I'm saying is how most textbooks handle these. Let's see if it'll work. The first prompt says, a new manufacturing technique makes capital easier to substitute for labor. Okay, well, let's review quickly the 4 determinants of price elasticity of demand for a good or service we already looked at earlier in the semester. They were the availability of close substitutes, necessity versus luxury, and then the other 2 were somewhat mechanical, the time horizon and the definition of the market. The more broadly defined, the less the elasticity. The more narrowly defined, the more there are of substitutes. So these things were overlapping, if you remember. So those were the 4 things we explored already. Now, let me read this prompt again. Let's see if we can apply the 4 things we've learned already to this prompt. That telemarketing call has put me in a bad mood. Hopefully that just makes me more energetic or something. I don't know. A new manufacturing technique makes capital easier to substitute for labor. One of our determinants that we already looked at earlier in the semester was the availability of close substitutes. Can we not apply what we've already learned to the labor market? It says right here, now there is an easier substitute. More substitutes. More easily substituted. This would increase the price elasticity of the demand for labor, precisely because of the things we've already explored earlier in the semester. Firms can now replace people with machines more easily than they could before whatever this innovation is. So that means their demand for labor would be more sensitive to wage changes. If this is happening in your labor market, it's not a good time to ask for a raise because they can be very responsive and say, higher wages, see you later. We'll just replace you with the machine because the substitute is more available. So I think we have the tools to answer these. So that was the answer. It would increase the elasticity of demand for labor because of the availability of the substitution of capital. Letter B. There is an increase in the number of substitutes for the final product that labor produces. Well, if the demand for your product is becoming more elastic because of the availability of close substitutes, doesn't that mean you, the laborer, are also could come or go more easily? You're not as needed, and if you have a law or something that pushes your wages up, you will be less needed. The firm will be more responsive because those prices can't be passed along to the consumer because the consumer has many substitutes to choose from related to the things that you make. So this one I know doesn't fit quite as perfectly into the 4 determinants of elasticity that we've already explored, but it's kind of like answered in the question, isn't it? Because the demand for labor is derived demand, the greater the elasticity of demand for the final product, the greater elasticity of demand for labor. If people don't need, remember necessity versus luxury, if people don't need the thing you make as much as they used to, they don't need you as much as they used to. So your elasticity moves with the elasticity, your price elasticity as a laborer, price elasticity of demand for labor moves with the elasticity of demand for the final product because of the necessity versus luxury determinant for the final product passing through to the necessity versus luxury of the demand for labor. Letter C. After a drop in the prices of capital inputs, labor accounts for a larger portion of firms' factor costs. So this one I'd say is probably the most complicated to think about. Again, a drop in the prices of capital inputs. So machinery has become cheaper. Now, labor as a percentage of the firm's costs is higher than capital is because of two inputs a firm uses to make stuff: capital and labor. If capital's price is coming down and labor's isn't, labor will be a larger percentage of costs. So if you as a laborer know you're a larger percentage of the firm's cost, does it feel like a good time to go in and demand a raise? They're probably going to say, see you later, because you're already costing us more than the capital anyway. It's very closely related to the first one. If capital has become cheaper, capital has become a more tempting substitute for labor, right? So if capital is cheaper, labor is less necessary. So I'm thinking of it as substitutes. Also, we could think of it as necessity versus luxury. It's more of a luxury, is one way to think about it. Therefore, whichever of those four determinants we already looked at, you use, since they're so overlapping, whichever of those two that I just discussed you're thinking of, notice they both increase the price elasticity of demand for labor. So all three of these were increases in the price elasticity of demand, and I hope I've illuminated some reasons why, so that if you get slightly different prompts, you could apply them, or if you get different world events, you could apply the things that we've already discussed to those events and use that in your personal forecasting and thinking.